Think we're all starting to enter now. So thank you all for joining us for our fifth module, Asset-Based Approaches in STEM. Today we have our wonderful presenter, Dr. Claudia Garcia Luis, who is a associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She is a proud first-generation college student, Mexican immigrant, and mommy scholar. Dr. Garcia Luis brings a deeply personal and scholarly commitment to her work. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on disrupting stereotypes and deficit narratives about Latinx and other underrepresented students. Through culturally appropriate asset-based approaches, she highlights the rich racial, cultural, and linguistic diversity within Latinx communities, challenging their homogenization in educational research and practice. So I will hand it over to her to start her presentation.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I know it's early over there. I've already had a cup of coffee, so I'm a cup of coffee ahead of you. I will take that into consideration as I move through. I just wanted to thank the coordinators and the organizers for inviting me, and to congratulate each and every one of you. It's summertime. I recognize that. And I also recognize that, sitting in front of the screen for 2 hours is a lot. And so with that being said, my facilitation style is let's go and move along as we all feel comfortable. And so what I will ask for you all today is, if you are able, turn on your cameras, just because it's really difficult to connect with one another if our cameras are off. If you aren't able to completely understand, I think you all have been together. This is the fifth time, right? And so building trust and having difficult conversations, particularly we're going to be talking about things that maybe some of us are fearful to engage in, and or we don't even know how to get started, right? So like it requires a certain level of vulnerability. And I'm here for it. So congratulations to each one of you for being in this space, and felicidades for engaging in this personal and professional development. I'm going to share my screen. I have activities, I have videos, and I have I was just telling the coordinators that at UTSA, we are launching our initial master's program, online program. And so I've been taking all of these classes on how to make things more engaging online. So you can be my test subjects and let me know if it was helpful or not, things that I've done. But one of the things I discovered was a Padlet, and the students seem to like it. So I'm going to try it on you all. So I'm gonna share my screen really quick, and I will ask for you all to introduce yourselves in a little bit. Okay, here we go. So today, what we're going to be talking about is culturally responsive and relevant teaching professional development is the title. We're going to be engaging a lot of topics and maybe terms, approaches that may be new to some of us. Maybe we have thought about them and have identified them in different ways. Like many terms in academia, they will have they will be called differently in different fields, but essentially they are the same definition. I really want to encourage each and every one of you to center your personal identities and your lived experiences, both within the profession, but also outside, in your daily life and your experiences, and bring them into the training. As someone who started my profession in student affairs, I loved the idea of holistic student development, which centered students both as individuals external to the university, as individuals who belonged in ethnic communities, in pan-ethnic communities, and different racial and demographic communities. And what does it mean to center and to recognize that the intersecting identities of individuals provide a very different perspective on who they are, beyond, a face in a classroom. So I invite you to also center those experiences. I want to start off. I'll provide a little bit of background in terms of like where I come from in my positionality statement, but I do want to start by recognizing the current land from where I teach and learn and live in. Its ancestral name is Yanawana, and so I want to acknowledge the Payaya, the people of Yanawana, and the Tappilam Coahuiltecans who are native to this land. And I will connect land acknowledgement. Many of our professions are introducing land acknowledgements, and then we introduce them, right? And we don't do anything with them. And so I want you to remember this introduction because I have been challenging myself to really think about what it means to live and learn alongside the descendants of the Payaya and the Tapilam and the Coahuiltecans in their native land. What does it mean to be a visitor in this land? And what does it mean to also be respectful in this land? And so what you see here is the mural of the creation story. And so you see that water, Yanawana, represents the place of water. And water is really, really important to the people of this area. And it's we're also living in a drought. We have this sacred hole called the Blue Hole in the area, and it has been taken over by the state, and they don't allow Native people to go and pray and conduct ceremony in that space. And they've actually it's now in danger of drying out. And so I want us to think about, okay, well, is this a native issue? Is this a indigenous issue? Is this an ecological issue? Is this a policy issue? And I would venture to say that it's an issue that affects every single one of us. Even though it's happening here, we see replicas of it happening in other places. And so I start with this introduction because that's what being culturally responsive means, is understanding the culture around you, not just culture in terms of ethnicity and traditions, but also culture, political culture, social culture, contemporary issues. All of that affects what's happening in our current location. Oops. And I won't be talking to you all the whole time, so I promise. I'm just going to get through this introduction and then we'll move on to some hands-on stuff. Paulo Freire is a very well-known educator around the world in the fields, in certain fields. And so I'm really curious to see, oh, I can't see you all. But you know, I'll ask to see your hands later, but one of my favorite quotes about him is education does not challenge the world. Education does not change the world. Education changes people. People change the world. And when we look at this quote as educators, there is so much responsibility on us to ensure that we are changing minds, that we are changing people, and that we are challenging homogeneity within our classrooms. And through that process, in many ways, we are facilitators of changing the world. Our college classrooms are spaces that bring together people from diverse experiences, backgrounds, dreams, political views. It is the one place where people come and sit together, not for the purpose of a political or personal agenda, but rather to learn and engage in that process. And it was through this spirit that Paulo Freire turned around what was in that time, Brazil had a horrible an education, or people were illiterate. And so he turned around illiteracy in Brazil through very similar processes that we will be discussing today. But I just wanted to provide this quote to also anchor it to, again, my initial comments of, you know, saying thank you for being in this space during the summer for 2 hours where you could be doing other things. So I wanted to anchor it in this quote. Um, oh, okay. There's a document I created that the facilitators will be sharing with you all. It's a Word document, super simple for your note taking, but I do know that some of these terms are new for folks. And so I just wanted to make it easy for you all to think about, how am I going to implement these these teachings or these quotes into my pedagogy, or what am I going to do personally to, bring them into my classroom, my life? So on the left, you'll see a terminology. There's going to be a lot of terminologies. I also created a terminology sheet for you all that you will be receiving later today. But this is for you as you go along to also, if you want, if you are someone who takes notes and prefers them on the computer, then there's a template, a word template for you. But I know you're here not just to spend your time, but rather because you are interested in developing better or more informed teaching practices to expanding your pedagogical approaches to serving and teaching alongside students who are similar to you, but also diverse. And so I want us to think through what it means to work with old practices. Like, what was I doing in the past? And what do I want to do in the future as it pertains to certain terms? How do I plan on implementing it? And are there resources, right? And you're not going to fill all of this out right now, but this is just kind of, it's an evolving document that you can utilize. And then at the bottom, I always have this for whenever I go places, I always have, let's see. Oh, thank you. I always have this for myself, learnings, teachings, aha moments that gave me pause. And it could be a quote. It could be a comment from your colleagues. It could be what someone is doing somewhere else. I also am hoping that you get a lot of resources out of this. So I had a lot of fun creating this presentation because I geek out on this stuff. I love learning about what other people are doing. And I love learning about how I can also expand my own teaching, my own practice, and also my own perspectives. So that document you have, this is our agenda for today. I'm going to share my positionality. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, and then I want to learn about you all. I'm hoping that by me learning a little bit about what you all are, what areas you work in, maybe your backgrounds, whatever you feel comfortable sharing out. I'm not going to say share this, or that. Your introduction, share what feels comfortable to you. And then we're going to go into learning objectives. This is the agenda. But ultimately, I promise I'm connecting it to STEM education. I'm going to provide an array of examples of how all of these practices are applied in the STEM classroom. More often than not, we see it applied in the K-12 classroom because it seems to be easier, but it's not. It's the same. And so I have very clear, concrete examples that are done globally here at UTSA. And then finally, I have a Mellon program, a Mellon Foundation grant that allows for us to engage in this project called the Urban Bird Project that brings into consideration the first slide, working with local communities, indigenous communities around environmentalism and ecological, traditional ecological knowledge. The goal would be whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And I do know that when we're talking about ourselves and we're talking about pedagogy and teaching and professors, many of us were not trained to be professors. I know I wasn't, and I went into the classroom and I was scared for the first 5 years because I didn't want to mess anyone up, right? I was like, what am I sharing? And we're expected to know everything, and particularly in the STEM fields, right? Like where a lot of it we're taught that there is no nuance, right? So I'll just open it up popcorn style. You can call on the next person if that's what you would like to do, but just whatever you feel comfortable sharing as it pertains to the context or whatever I may have shared. And if there's any hopes that you would like to share as well, it is up to you. I'm going to ask Joey because you had a big smile and you gave yourself away. So I'm going to ask Joey to get started, please. And then you can call on the next person.
Oh, darn. I'm sorry about that. Apologizing to myself here. All right. Well, thank you. My name is Joseph Joey Wilcox. I always tell my students and everyone to call me Joey because Joseph was just what I was called when I was in trouble. So, yeah, we don't want to see me crying in the corner. Let's see. I'm a first generation student like yourself. So it's one of those things that I always forget too. It's like whenever I do these kinds of introductions, for some reason it just seems to be buried. And I don't know why I always forget that. But first generation, I was like the first to go to college. Uh and in my immediate family, the first to graduate high school, actually. So yeah, my parents weren't very weren't very education focused. So yeah, so this navigating secondary education, post-secondary education was always a challenge for me as well, and trying to figure out what I was interested in as well as where I was going to go with it. So it was fun, but I did have a background in science, and that was what I was focused. I was always passionate for research, even if I didn't call it research as a kid. I'd make the observations, go through the rigmarole, go through all the process, and I didn't even know that I was doing science at the time. And that's generally what I try to wake my students up to as well, where it's like every time you have a question and you go through a process, even if you end up saying, I don't trust science, you went through the scientific process to get there. So it's like you still are trusting science in some way. But I got my PhD a few years back, took the long route because I had to go through it all myself, paid for it all myself. Yeah, so it took a while longer than probably most, but and I'm working at UNLV right now with the College of Sciences. Um, I was an educator. I'm an educator first and foremost. I'm always like you. I'm always trying to find student-centered ways. I'm a constructivist, if you're familiar with those in educational theories. So yeah, I'm a facilitator. I'm just there to basically guide the students. They come in with their own ideas. I love inquiry-based learning. I love letting them come up with their own ideas and see what we can do with them. And I'm going a little bit too long on time here. I'm sorry. It's like you say, I've just woke up myself like an hour or so ago. So but yeah, so I'm excited to be part of this and just learn whatever I can do to become a better educator. Thank you for the time, and thank you for putting this all together and being part of this. So yeah, I'll pass it on over to pop. How about Thomas?
Easy enough, thank you. So I'm Thomas Bose. I teach intro-level geology in the geoscience department. I'm involved in a lot of outreach, being a father of four. My youngest is 4 months today. So summer's been very challenging with, coordinating with everybody, but it's been going well. But I do like reaching to the community. This is my first time doing any workshop like this, and it's been eye-opening every class. And I'm enjoying the papers because again, it's just this is going to be my third semester teaching, so I'm fairly new. And so any insight on how I can reach other students and just trying to, bring that geoscience, particularly in today's climate, to, the next generation of geoscientists. I'll pass this on to who we got? Hans.
Thanks, Thomas. Hi, I'm Hannes. I'm a relatively new assistant professor in the Department of Geoscience. So this will be also next semester my fourth semester teaching. So I'm also excited and happy to learn more about how to improve that and how to engage students better. I moved to the US 2019, so I'm here 6 years. So originally I'm from Germany, so it's also important for me to learn more about the culture things here. So that's like if you're coming from a different background, so that's also super helpful for me. And I'll call on Jan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yan Hu. I'm a Chinese, and I started as an assistant professor in the Department of Geoscience last year around this time. And I just finished my first semester teaching, and I will be teaching an intro-level geoscience class next semester. So I will be dealing with much larger numbers of students. So I want to know how to engage them into my teaching. That's why I attend this workshop. Yes. And I will pass on to Carrie.
Thanks, Jan. Hi, I'm Carrie Tyler. I'm also an assistant professor in geosciences. I have a lot of identities that intersect. I'm an immigrant. I'm first generation. I'm also queer and a woman. So all of those things have really affected my experience and my journey to get here. But I'm really hoping to connect more with our Hispanic students here at UNLV, learn more about their culture, how to reach them, how to teach in a culturally responsive and responsible way to serve them, and go beyond serving to actually having them be more successful and have good outcomes as well. I'll call next on Michael.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. I hope you can hear me. I'm at the airport traveling back from Minneapolis. I've been here actually to a short course which touched on some similar issues that we're talking about with the early career faculty. So yeah, my name is Michael. I'm from Germany. I never have much to share. I grew up in a small village. I was also the first one who went to university from my family. And now I'm like, I just started 2 months ago in the geoscience department. And yeah, I'm in this course mainly because yeah, we don't have these like big cultural differences where I come from and at our universities, or at least not to that extent. So I'm here also to learn more about how to approach students better in this environment. Exactly. And I might disconnect for a little bit soon because I have to go through security. But I will call on first Donald.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. Have a good trip back. Um, I'm not a new professor. I'm an older professor. Been at UNLV for about 9 years, but I was in Hawaii for 20 years before that. Yeah, and I didn't grow up to be a professor. When I was in like ninth grade, I wanted to be a hockey player. And somehow I got turned on to college, and I was really the interesting first in my siblings to go to college or to get a degree, even though my parents have PhD degrees. So there was a little disruptive family issues that I think held some of my siblings back. But yeah, then to get into biology, I'm a biology professor. I teach evolutionary biology and conservation genetics. And I've been thinking about, how do you translate these kind of cultural differences and backgrounds into something like evolution and conservation genetics, and we clearly can, even though you sort of at the initial blush you think of science as very analytical, divorced from individuals. It's very scientific and that kind of thing. But the subject matter that we teach in evolution and conservation genetics relates back to people's land, where they're from, conservation issues and that kind of thing. And so we did, of course, a lot of that in Hawaii. And I've been thinking about how to do that here. I've been just teaching conservation genetics a few times, but I'm trying to think now about how to allow students to bring their backgrounds into something like conservation biology. And it could be something like, pick a species or an ecosystem from your background and bring that in, because I was thinking about how a student could not only relate to the subject matter, but help their families relate to them as they're taking evolutionary biology and conservation, and their family may go, why are you doing that? Why are you going into evolutionary biology? Not a very applied field, but there's lots of applied aspects of evolutionary biology to local communities and local environments, of course. And as we know it in our own field, we go, oh, of course. But a lot of the general public doesn't really understand that. And so I'm thinking about how I can help the students relate back to their family, just like I had to learn how to relate my interest back to my parents that were musicians and nurses and things like that. They were like, what is that field you're in? And so I'm trying to think about how I can help the students sort of go through that transition too, to relate back to their family kind of thing and cultural background. Yeah. Okay, who can I pass it on? How about Zach?
Sure, thanks. So my name is Zach. I'm also an assistant professor in the geoscience department. I started here about a year and a half ago, maybe a little over a year ago. I'm originally from Boston, and so I'm a new transplant to Southern Nevada. I guess in previous field work and at a previous institution, um, I guess over the past 7 years now, I've done a lot of field work in Wyoming, working closely with the Northern Arapaho tribe there, and I've gotten close to the indigenous community there. But I think one of the things that the reading highlighted to me is that I'm still very unfamiliar with the local native communities in Southern Nevada. And I think it's something that I would like to, over the next couple of years, build that connection and incorporate more into my courses.
Hi, I'm Julie Cohen. I am the Assistant Director for the Teaching and Learning Commons. So I'm actually here in a kind of different capacity. And in the Teaching and Learning Commons, we're really interested in and also prioritize, we sort of use the language of inclusive teaching, but a really broad category that would certainly include CRRT, and we're very interested in bringing all of the valuable resources and conversations and things that are happening in this course to the kind of wider community at UNLV. And so I'm so happy to be going through the process and seeing all of these fantastic presentations and all of this wonderful work. And just from the kind of personal perspective, I would say kind of my core identities, it also include mother, right? And mother and educator. And yeah, I love, Claudia, how you kind of note the the intersection of those. I think that's definitely something that I bring wherever I go. And my background, I've taught for over 20 years. Only recently kind of moved into professional development and faculty work, but my background is in the humanities. So I'm also very much enjoying this process and learning about STEM education and kind of how we can apply these same ideas to STEM education. And let's see, who has not gone? Jing Chan?
Hey, my name is Jing Chen. I'm associate professor at Nevada Institute of Personalized Medicine. I'm not new here. I have been here almost 10 years. I started like 2015 July 1st, so it's about 10 years now. But originally, I came from China. I'm the first generation to come the immigration. So I didn't teach, involved a lot of teaching, but I work a lot with students in my lab, and most of them are from different background, different majors. I came here for these courses, just want to understand how to understand those students with different background. For me, I can understand them, how hard they struggle as immigrant. And also from my background, I was trained in China as a doctor. I have MD and a PhD. When I came here earlier years, I'm trying to still try to do the actually doctors passed my USMLE first step, but I stopped there because I have some other responsibility for their family. So now I have a lot of students work in my lab. The goal is try to be a doctor, many from the School of Life Science. I do think I try to support them as much as I can in my lab, like give they can do research, so they can publish the papers, so they can make good resume, at least for their applications. So far in my lab, at least like 7 students went to like a medical school. So I'm so proud of that. That is almost my reason to come here, but I still thinking there's a lot of way to understand students better. They have very broad background, so that's how I came here. Thank you. So for next, I will pass to I think in my front there's a Michael Perfico.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Hi, my name's Michael Pravica. I'm a professor of physics. I've been at UNLV for over 22 years. Before that, I was at New Mexico Highlands University, which was also a minority serving institution. I'm the great grandson, and son of immigrants. So it's I'm very passionate about that and making sure that all people all students realize their natural potential. And, and so I also did there was Dene College was applying for a TCUP, Tribal Colleges and Universities grant from the National Science Foundation around 2003 when I came to UNLV. And so I traveled over 1,000 miles on the reservation, visiting people, visiting different campuses, and basically realizing, how different students, depending on where they are, their geographical location, their socioeconomic status, how different their educational experience can be. And so I have been, for over 25 years, I've been teaching students of all backgrounds, and very proud of what they've learned and where they're going. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, and I'm a mentor. And so I, I my interest is always to kind of stay on top of just the latest. What is the research? How do we develop strategies? Because obviously we're not doing enough. There's just not enough STEM majors produced in this country, and I believe that we can find them everywhere, that at all levels of students, you know, uh, and so I want to encourage them and help make their transition to the world of STEM a success. Thank you.
I think we have Ji Chun. Is that how you say your name left?
Yes, Claudia. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm Jichun Lee. So I'm a professor of mathematics in the math department. I joined UNLV in 2000 from UT Austin after I did my postdoc there. Uh, I'm an immigrant from China to US. So I came to US in 1993 and worked at Florida State University for my PhD. So after I got my PhD, then I moved to UT Austin for postdoc. Then after 2 years postdoc, I got my position at the UNLV in 2000. Then basically, I started working at the UNLV since 2000 as a math professor. So, but like you said, we never got the formal training in teaching, unfortunately. So basically, we do the job from learning and observing from what other like senior professor how they do. Uh, I really appreciate this opportunity actually. So, but I find teaching mathematics is always quite challenging, even though I've been taught like 25 years at UNLV. So I always find some like new challenges, for various reasons. So, uh, I've of course in the past, like in China, we are like very homogeneous, honestly. But of course, we have lots of minority. But I never got the opportunity interacting with them, because I'm living in the southeast part of China. So basically, everybody is like the same nationality. Even though in China we have like over probably 50 nationalities. Okay, so but I never got chance to interact with them. But when we came to US, actually we see all kinds of people, all kinds of background, and also especially the mathematics. So when I uh, teach, I assume okay they should know these, right? Because like okay when we teach calculus, we assume that hey you should be very good at the college algebra, but unfortunately it's not. So for various reasons, I find it's a really, really challenge. Okay, honestly, sometimes I thought, okay, maybe I should quit my job to be just full-time research somewhere at the national lab because I've been working in like a Air Force research laboratory for many summer times. So, but I really like work with graduate students for various reasons. For undergraduates, unfortunately, I didn't interact many with them because of course except the teaching, right? So we teach all kinds like undergraduate levels, but unfortunately I don't have like deep uh, connections with many undergraduate students, even though I try to. But for various reasons, I find a lot of students they don't like mathematics. But I'm trying to attract them to mathematics. So using my like computer simulation work, like uh, developing like invisibility cloakings. So trying to educate them. Hey, here you can see some application of the linear algebra matrix. So trying to get them attracted to math. especially to our PhD programs. So yeah, I've trained like so far like maybe 6 or 7 PhD students. 2 of them now work at the DOE labs. So I'm quite proud with them. And also like one female student will start her assistant professor position at the University of Minnesota Dulles this summer, you know. So I think I'm glad I did something now, but I still lots things to learn. So you know that's why I think this provides a good opportunity for me, even though for the uh, general teaching schedule, not just for like a culturally responsive teaching, you know. So yeah, I guess I should stop here. Yeah, thank you all giving me this opportunity to speak. Yeah.
Did we miss anyone? I feel like everyone went, but I may be off. Did everyone speak? Okay, awesome. I know it takes a while. I know that. And but this was also my favorite part. I can already tell it's my favorite part because I did not feel separate from any of you, and we have very diverse backgrounds. In fact, I felt closer to you. I heard connecting with students, right? Like that was a resonating theme. I want to support students. I've supported X amount of students, helping them establish their goals. Immigration seems to be a massive connection, right? The interconnectedness of our individual intersecting identities and recognizing that this right now, what we did is essentially a snapshot of what exists in our classrooms, right? So what does it look like to then teach students through perspectives that take into consideration who they are, where they come from? And Adele, thank you for that, for your story. As someone who comes from a story telling family, and there's a way that stories help us understand and conceptualize things that maybe theory doesn't help us. And so through your story, what you're saying is, here I was assuming that they didn't care or blah, 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 until I went somewhere and I saw their realities and I was able to put myself in their background, right? In their neighborhood, in their community. And then I was like, oh, it had nothing to do with my class or me or the content even, but it's really easy for us to say, well, it's the content or it's this or it's that or it's them. And so what we want to do today is really humanize. So thank you all for humanizing each other and each other's experiences and sharing experiences as well. I know it took up space and time, but it's worth it. I also want to note who was it? Who shared about, oh, Donald, you shared about Hawaii. There's a prophecy. Did you hear the prophecy of the white turtle? The white turtle just returned. And so if you were in Hawaii, the last queen of Hawaii, before the territory was taken from the native people's control, she went to a hut and prayed and thought about what would happen, what would be the future of her people. And she had a prophecy that she said, when the white turtle returns, it was this massive prophecy. Well, the white turtle just returned to the Hawaiian Islands. And so it's this massive, like I got chills when I heard about it, but here we are. We're going to talk about traditional ecological knowledge today. We're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about what some people would consider, well, that doesn't matter. What does that have to do with contemporary days? Well, Indigenous peoples believed that we were interconnected with the cosmos and beyond, that we were connected with the spiritual realm, that we are connected with our plants as siblings, that we are connected to the animals as siblings, right? And so when we're teaching an environmental justice class, or we're teaching about, I don't know, whatever it may be, ecosystems, then we can bring into conversation what it meant for this situation to happen. And if you have a Hawaiian student in the room, then you automatically have them because they know that you know, and you don't need to tell them, I got you, right? Like sometimes you walk into a classroom or you're walking down the street and you see someone and you know they know just by how you look at them. You're like, ¿qué onda? Like for Mexicanos, it's like, what's up? And they know. You don't have to say anything, right? And so it's that small thing, it's that small hook that allows us to connect with our students. Yes, Donald.
No, I was just trying to say yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so that's another thing. So I didn't even share my family. You saw my family. That picture that I had on my positionality statement is of us being at Zion National Forest during the pandemic. And one of the things that I want to note is that oftentimes you see Black and Latino families do not go out into nature and take advantage of these opportunities. Well, what I had my kids do, because I'm an educator, we researched before we even went there. We researched, the kids had to do a research project on who were the original inhabitants of the land, what was the relationship to this place. And also for my geologists, they were learning about the different types of land, different rocks in that area. So those are just ways in which we can also take our knowledge and our love to our family members. I'm gonna get going. And as I'm presenting, if you all have comments or stories or whatever it is, I already told Blanca and Aisha and Melissa that we're not going to get through all the content, and that's okay, because what we're going to get through is what we need to get through. I do have examples of how math education has incorporated ancestral knowledge and different practices around the world. I have examples of that. I have examples of how that is done in biology through the use of hip hop. I have examples of how it's done in cleaning in indigenous communities through the cleansing of water. So there are a lot of examples. If I don't finish, and there's a lot of videos as well, or there's videos, not a lot, but there's videos. So if I don't finish the lecture, I'm happy to share this with the facilitators, and you all can just click and watch them, because the goal is for you all to or to leave with examples of what you can utilize in your classroom. And these are all college examples, right? These are in Wisconsin-Madison and teachers at Columbia. And there's different levels of colleges as well, because sometimes people say, yeah, you can do that at a teaching institution, but not in an R1. It's like, well, no, it's being done actually in Teachers College in Columbia, right? So so with that being said, if there's anything that you want to engage or discuss or push back on, right? We're in this process of learning together as well. And so let's welcome different perspectives or different approaches to the content. Okay, I'm going to share. Okay, so just really quick. Oh, just my family really quick. My husband, firstborn Haitian, firstborn in the US of Haitian immigrants. And so my children are also what we call bicultural, biracial, and that will come into context as we go through in the conversation, not just about my kids, but in general, the students that we are teaching today. So our learning objectives for today, my conversation is mostly centered on what I know. I am not a STEM expert. I am a interdisciplinary scholar. I try to learn from communities, different disciplines, and bring them together. So I bring to you is Mesoamerican knowledge. So today, these are based on my background and my expertise. This is what I have identified for our learning objectives to articulate the value of Mesoamerican indigenous knowledge systems as foundational to science and relevant to contemporary STEM education. For many of us, I can't remember in college or undergrad when any field within, like any STEM class, touched on the contributions of Mesoamerican or indigenous peoples from the Americas or beyond. And so that's essential if you're trying to engage individuals who come from backgrounds from these nations, then you need to help them understand that they too come from civilizations that were astronomers, that were doing scientific inquiry despite the books not teaching them. So it's important to be able to make those connections with the students, to identify and challenge deficit-based narratives commonly associated with historically marginalized students in STEM. And so we're not just talking about racial and ethnic minoritized students, we're also talking about women. We're also talking about people with disabilities, right? So I want us to also think about asset-based and pushing what does asset-based means. It means that we're also reframing our understanding of who traditionally underrepresented are. And in the case of STEM, I would say it's people from poor working backgrounds, right? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But for today, we're gonna, again, mostly focus on Latinx students and Indigenous students. And a lot of the literature that I'll be drawing from are from Black African American scholars and Chicanx scholars. We're going to reflect on our own pedagogical assumptions, and I say our own because we all have them, and how these shape teaching practices and student engagement within our classroom, but then also within our labs, right? Many of you all have labs. I don't have labs, but I do have a research team, and I think about that as well. What am I perpetrating that I shouldn't be? What are my assumptions that I'm passing on to my students? Am I being holistically inclusive, and what does that look like? So reflection is an essential component of it. Identify asset-based frameworks such as community cultural wealth, funds of knowledge, as well as like I said, I have the little cheat sheet for you all with a lot of the terminology, as well as the what was it? The assignment that you all had. We will be engaging that as well. And there was resource list on that document as well. And then finally, commit to a specific instructional change or strategy that centers students' strengths, histories, and cultural identities in STEM learning environments. I hope that through the examples I bring to you all today, that a small spark ignites in your mind in terms of how you can adapt, adopt, or modify some of those practices or techniques into your classroom. I know it's really difficult, especially for the large lecture halls, but there are ways to do it, right? So part of the hope then is that you all are also a cohort, and that you can rely on each other to help each other think through what that looks like beyond this class and in years, months to come. So we will be doing a lot of talking. Hopefully it's not me talking at you all, but hopefully as we get deeper into the content, you are feeling motivated to speak and share out. And in this process, I also want you to think about what happens at home, right? What happens when you gather and you have conversations? What does the conversation feel like? Where do people gather in your home? Why does it feel comfortable? And I know we can't replicate, for example, in my family and in my husband's family, they're Haitian, but they still gather at the kitchen table. Why does that space feel so intimate, right? What is happening there that allows for us to get together and have good conversations? How is the information passed on in your community or in your surrounding communities? How is information passed on? Not just like what is identified as knowledge, but what is considered information? How is it passed on? How is trust built? So if we are having students in our classroom and we are teaching them, we need to build a certain level of trust for them to come to us if they need support. We need to be able to build a certain level of trust to for them to feel comfortable engaging topics or content, or pushing back. And it is when you have students pushing back in a respectful manner, right? And they're pushing back, then you know you've reached a certain level of comfort because the student feels comfortable being able to push back. So I invite you to engage, share, speak, and process as we move through this conversation together, whatever ways make feel comfortable for you. I know we have chat, and then we also, we have the little raise hand icon. I unfortunately can't see you all because it's full screen. So I'm going to try to figure out how to do that so I can actually see you all. But when you do chat, it does pop up. So they're coming in. And I appreciate the vulnerability and transparency, right? This is not a standard assessment. I created it on my own. And so, for those folks who are like, I scored low, it's okay. So as folks will continue to chime in, does anyone want to verbalize what they wrote or expand on what you have shared, or maybe what other colleagues have shared that gave you a reflection? I'm confused about the scoring. Yeah. So this is a really good example of how many of our students feel when they enter a classroom and the content is foreign to them, right? As educators, for us, maybe we have been around the subject matter for a really long time, or we developed a passion long ago, and we have experienced, learning in that area. And for some other people, they haven't experienced. And I forget who it was, but someone said it was shocking to them to see the difference in terms of educational opportunities based on location and whatnot. And that's the reality We are at the college level, teaching at the college level, which means that we are inheriting students that have gone through a K-12 education system that is not equitable, that is highly segregated based on socioeconomic status, that is highly segregated based on race because of historical redlining. So there's a lot of things that we are inheriting in our classroom that we absolutely have no control over, right? So that's the first thing for us to recognize, is that we are welcoming students into our classroom along with the backpack of great experiences they've had, horrible experiences they've had. I personally was told I would never amount to anything by my high school principal, and here I am, right? So, but those words cut people differently. And so when we're in the classroom, the first thing we need to recognize, particularly with STEM fields, within the STEM field, Jitun, you mentioned it, where you're like, it's hard to teach, right? And part of it is that we have been traumatized through education, and it's not just minoritized students, but as a whole, education for many of us who share identities in this classroom, whether you're LGBTQ plus identified or come from a conservative background, who did not allow you to explore areas that you may want to explore or explore evolution, or did not have a school that had good funding, all of those experiences we bring with them to the college classroom. And so this exercise had two functions. The first function is to introduce someone, to introduce folks, or to put folks in positions where maybe the content is different. Maybe what you're being asked to reflect on, you're like, maybe you felt attacked, or maybe you felt like, well, this is irrelevant, or maybe you were like, I need to do better. Whatever feelings those were, we need to then individually break them down and try to understand why they were. The scoring may not have made sense, but maybe it did make sense for other people, right? And again, that's what we are with our students. That's what we're navigating. It's really, really easy for me, as someone who only teaches master's and doctoral students who have smaller classrooms, to engage in this conversation with students around, why did it feel that way? What can I do to make it better? What are ideas you have? But when you have a massive 300 student auditorium, it's more difficult to be more inclusive. I also understand that there are prescribed curriculums, and then there's other flexible curriculums. So in that process, there is still opportunities and place for nuance. And that's what we're gonna discuss in a little bit. But I just wanna open it up for folks if there's anything you wanna share or reflect on as it pertains to what we just discussed, and the activity. And that's why there was the notion of visceral feelings. That is a visceral feeling, right? It's also an emotional reaction. And the reason why you may be feeling that way is because you're exactly where you need to be, because you care. Because people who don't care will shake it off. Whereas when you do care, you're more invested in wanting to do good by your students. You're wanting to ensure that you're doing the best that you can, that when students leave your classroom, they're better prepared, that they don't encounter the imposter syndrome, right? So imposter syndrome is real. And I like to say you are made to feel like an imposter, not that you are the imposter and you're suffering from something, because it's systemic, right? So you shared you were first gen, first in family, many first gen, first in family individuals. And that's why it's important to establish an understanding of who is in the room. And that could be done in large classrooms by doing a demographics survey before students are in the classroom. You can literally, through Canvas, do a demographic survey and have these identities. Are you first generation? How do you feel about, and it could be Likert scale, right? Like, how do you feel about math? I love it. I'm scared. I'm blah, blah, blah. Like, you can do a Likert scale and do an assessment. It provides you with a temperature gauge of where the students are and allows for you to have a starting point on how to approach the conversation. There is a question, the final question was, which was my next slide. It says, how might learning about your people's scientific and cultural contributions have enhanced your confidence, pride, or connection to STEM? I know I share that I did not have that in my K-12 education, college education, unless I went to a Mexican American studies or Native studies course. That's when I learned a little bit more about it, but that's because they were designated as the courses to take care of that. Everything else was standard knowledge, not in addition to, right? And so this is a really good example of how we can decenter normness, whatever we have normed, and we can create an opportunity to learn more about our students, whether it's a large hall or a small hall, but you're able to apply a demographic survey and have students let you know how they're feeling. I do that with my research methods course, and especially when I teach statistics, there is so much fear around statistics. And I'm like, it's easy. And so we play around, right? But they don't know that. And once we break it down, they're like, wait, this is what you do? Yeah, this is what you do. And so it's even the approach, your approach to the conversation. It's how you are teaching. It's the materials you utilize, the examples you utilize that makes a big difference. So I hope you walk away with the inverse, which is this is a great affirmation of why you need to be in that space. You care so much that you have this ethical obligation and responsibility that you hold yourself to. But don't stress yourself out, because this is where change matters, right? And where change happens. Any other comments? And our students feel that way too, right? Like, I think that's the biggest reminder. And thank you for that valuable contribution, Joey, because our students feel that way. I feel that way. Many of us still feel that way when we go into spaces. When we go into spaces where we feel we shouldn't be in. My husband's a lawyer. We go to lawyer events. I hate dressing up. And so I'm there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. I feel so out of place. And I have no idea what to talk about with the other lawyer wives. But here I am, like, the guys go that way, which is very gendered, right? Like, guys go that way. And students also feel that way. Imagine them going into a classroom and they don't feel like they're dressed properly. Like, someone said they went to UT Austin. I remember some of my undergrads sharing that they were in classrooms with students who were driving around brand new Teslas, and they had Louis Vuitton purses, and they're like, I feel so inadequate being in the space. There's all these rich kids, and here I am. So even the way they are dressed, it makes them feel less than. And so there's a lot that our students are already competing with, and then they have to learn content, right? And so this is just a really good reminder that how we feel is also how they may be feeling in spaces. Any comments or questions or observations? Okay, I'm going to do this instead so that I could see you all if anybody decides to say anything. I'm going to minimize. Okay. Can you all see my screen now? Perfect. Okay, and I can see you all now. Perfect. Okay, that helps me out. So in that last question, these are a few books that I have found that intersect with Indigenous science and Indigenous cosmologies, and they have been utilized by different educators in their classrooms at the college level. The one on the far right, that one is Native American DNA. So they look at genetics. So those of you who they look at genetics and they look at native DNA and they look at tracing it. There is braiding sweetgrass, which is about ecological knowledge. And there is Cajete is this seminal, I would say, science educator who talks about the importance of scientific inquiry through an Indigenous perspective in the sciences, not like in research methods as a whole, but rather in the fields of sciences. So there's all of these different contributions from Native scholars. So for those of you who are thinking, how do I expand my own understanding? There was a comment that was written in terms of like, the more I don't realize, or I'm sorry, that they did not have the information needed to be able to teach through this perspective. These are opportunities to be able to learn these books, even include a chapter incorporated into your pedagogy, into your classroom, into your lectures. And that way it provides a different perspective. It decenters Western European knowledge. We're not talking about doing away with it. This is not what we're talking about. We are saying, how do we make our classroom more inclusive, more global, more diverse in terms of epistemological orientations and diverse epistemologies that you are bringing into, and ontologies that you're bringing into the classroom. Because contrary to what some folks may believe, science is not a Western creation, right? And I don't say that with disrespect, but there are civilizations like the Mayas, the Egyptians, the Aztecs who built pyramids and had clean running water and functioning cities in ways that even current scientists don't really understand how they were able, and I'm using quotations, how they were able to achieve all of that with the limited information they had, right? So there is historical evidence that our communities, and I say our communities as global South communities, as minoritized communities, that have made contributions. So what is culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching, and culturally sustaining pedagogy? So how do we take what we are talking about and how do we apply it? Well, these terms were already advanced by, we don't have to do the research, they've already been advanced, they've already been presented. So we're going to watch a short video that allows for us to understand what they are. It's super short and introduces us to the concepts.
For decades, researchers have explored how teachers can think of students' cultural identities and lived experiences as a tool for academic success. And these teaching methods, which experts broadly refer to as asset-based pedagogies, can get really complex. 3 terms we'll focus on to better understand this area of research are culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching, and the newer culturally sustaining pedagogy. To break it all down, we can think of these terms like we think of a tree. There are roots, a trunk, and branches and leaves. And when these types of teaching come together, they contribute to the shared goal of making schools a place that values students' cultures in a way that ultimately empowers all learners, but particularly students of color. For instance, take the roots. Teddy Beam Conroy, associate teaching professor at the University of Washington, said the roots can represent the rich wealth of knowledge of students' communities, which has been overlooked in mainstream education. A different approach to teaching that values that knowledge is known as culturally relevant pedagogy. It was introduced in the 1990s by Gloria Ladson-Billings after she researched how teachers effectively taught African-American students. She laid out culturally relevant pedagogy's 3 main components: prioritizing students' intellectual growth, creating an environment where students affirm and appreciate their cultural origin while also developing fluency in other cultures, and teaching students how to identify, analyze, and solve real-world problems, especially those around societal inequity. If culturally relevant pedagogy is the trunk of the tree, then culturally sustaining pedagogy and culturally responsive teaching are its branches, and each of their various components the leaves. In the year 2000, Geneva Gay coined the term culturally responsive teaching, which utilizes students' different cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives as tools for better classroom instruction. Things like understanding different groups' cultural values and traditions, sharing multiple perspectives with context, validating cultural identity, and modifying the classroom to fit different communication styles. These are all components of culturally responsive teaching. 12 years later, Django Paris coined the term culturally sustaining pedagogy, another branch on the tree and another framework that builds on Ladson-Billings' original research. Culturally sustaining pedagogy supports teaching in a way that celebrates multiculturalism and decenters whiteness in the classroom. So cultural differences aren't only respected and acknowledged, they're nurtured. All of these terms are really just trying to explain the bigger picture of asset-based pedagogies, or the overall tree, if you will. And even though each term has its own components, defined by different researchers at different times, they all share the same goal of making school a place where the knowledge of marginalized communities informs instruction. This type of teaching empowers all students to become lifelong critical thinkers. For continuing coverage on culturally responsive teaching.
Okay, reflections or thoughts? I want to get at least 2. Okay, so be forewarned.
I'll start. So some of the things she said were really interesting, but again, I kind of go to something that I was thinking of earlier, is that I'm just not sure how to do that. So like how to validate culture identity, how to share, I obviously sharing diverse perspectives, but like how to encourage them to do that. Understanding their values and traditions. I'm not in their world, and I actually some of the books you had on there is on my reading list, and I try to, but like I'm not. There's millions of different, ways of living. So understanding them, again, it has to be at a personal basis, and I struggle to understand how to do that effectively.
Thank you.
Well, I have a thought. I was thinking about your own upbringing and being embarrassed about your cultural backgrounds and how that may play into, our classrooms. If we want to bring out these different backgrounds into our classroom, how will the students feel about that? Will they really feel that they should share? Should they want to do that? Even if we're up front, saying, yes, please do that, or figuring out how to do that, they may be hesitant because they'll be looking around going, well, should I say that I'm from an immigrant family in this cultural this time? Probably not. Or I would, if I were in their shoes, I would be careful about it. And so I wonder how that will, does in the past and certainly currently in the minds of the students. Yeah.
Beautiful. Both of you, great points. But there is a mental shift that happens when you engage the contributions of peoples around the world, because it allows for individuals who come from backgrounds who do identify with the Western culture. It allows them to also expand their understanding. So inclusion is not about the minoritized population only. In fact, when you look at research across the board on who benefits the most when it comes to diverse classrooms, it tends to be students who come from homogeneous backgrounds and communities, and it tends to be white students, right? Because they haven't had the exposure to diverse communities. And when they leave the US, it's not white. The majority of the world is not white. And so what you learn in the classroom that provides you with a global advantage comes from the benefit of having diverse conversations, diverse knowledge, diverse experiences. So it's not just about serving diverse students. When we talk about, even if you don't have Asian students in your classroom, if you don't have Asian American students in your classroom, you should still include content on the contributions of Asian Americans, even though they're not in the classroom, because it allows for us to better understand as individuals, as educators, but also as students, the different contributions that people have made globally. So the developments are not attributed to a people, but rather humanity. Does that make sense? And so I love your question, Adele, because my next slide is the approach. Okay, so all of this, but how do we apply it? So we start at the micro level, which is at the student level. Right? Did that make sense, Donald, to you? I want to make sure that, okay, perfect. Because again, when we're talking about, even when we talk about DEI, right? And I want to bring that up because it's important. DEI is not just about race and ethnicity. It's about ability, disability. It's about access, gender equity. It's about economic equity. So there's all of these components that are attached to it, but we as a society have a very short attention span, or maybe we just go to certain things and not identify that we need to look at situations holistically. And so what I'm going to share with you, let me share my screen again. So the approach, how do we get there? This is all nice and dandy, it's theoretical, but I want to know how to apply it in my classroom. That's what I care about. So I had, when was it? Last week, we had Gloria Lanson Billings come to our campus and she delivered this amazing speech. And one of the things that she said is our students are extraordinary, ordinary people. And she went on and talked about how we need to see our students as extraordinary, ordinary people. The world is filled with extraordinary, ordinary people, everyday people. But if our students are our students, and at San Antonio, at UTSA, our students are working 2 jobs and making it to class and turning around and being primary breadwinners sometimes for their families, right? So there's all of these different things that are happening at the home that takes away from their opportunity and their ability to learn and engage in ways that we would hope they could. And so she talked about all of these added and taxes, right? Like the mental tax, the physical tax. A lot of our students here in San Antonio also don't have vehicles, and San Antonio is not a transportation friendly city. And so thinking about what it takes for students to make it to our class in the first place, she says, let's identify those extraordinary, ordinary people. Rather than getting on a student for arriving late and leaving early, let's set up a conversation with them and see what's going on. Instead of getting on a student about why they're falling asleep in the front. So I had this situation. There was a student, I was teaching a traditional ecological knowledge class, and there was a young lady, she would arrive on time, but she always sat in the front, but she would always fall asleep. And at first I was like, she's tired. Um, and so finally I set up a time to meet with her. I went to her and I was like, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. I know you're engaged, like you arrive early. I could see, is there something I can do to support you? Do you need to be able to get up? And she told me that she had switched medications. She was on a new medication and she couldn't stay awake, right? So it was me understanding that. So we began to meet separate and allow her to get the content that she was missing. So we came up with a plan, but that just happened this last semester. The student was struggling. She never came to me. She's like, you should have come to me. Here I thought I was being approachable. And she was like, I just, I didn't know how to approach you about it until you came to me. So that's just a very small example of how our students are extraordinary in a time when there's so much happening and yet they're still in our classroom. She also talked about student-centered achievement is contingent upon the educator. And these are the three things that she talked about. We need to understand cultural competence. It is not about knowing what's happening within the community. It's not even about knowing who you are, but being open to understanding what's happening, being able to read the room, understanding that what's happening nationally, politically, and how it affects individuals in our classroom is something that we need to be aware of. They're humans, and we can't expect for them to come into the classroom and turn everything off. Are there times in which we need to pause things in order for to listen to our students? Comprehension that one cannot teach through culturally homogeneous perspectives. How are we being inclusive through our pedagogy and our teaching? And we'll get to, I'll provide you all with examples of what that looks like through STEM-based education. The commitment to successfully preparing students to work in a global market where diverse perspectives are centered is essential. So how are we preparing students in the US to work abroad? Are we preparing them to work abroad? Right? And so I would say that it's very difficult for us to say that we are, because when we move towards homogeneity and when we move towards censorship of history and censorship of diverse perspectives, we are failing our students. We are failing our community. We are failing science as a whole, because that's not how the world operates. But how do we as educators then arrive at being inclusive, at bringing in diverse perspectives? So the first step is in understanding the contemporary student. What does it mean to be a contemporary student? We need to decenter Western knowledge and understand culture and understand that it is the norming of Western knowledge that then creates an us versus them mentality. I want to bring you back to our introductions. And after each one of you introduced yourself, I was like, oh, I have more in common with them than I don't. Does that make sense? And so when we norm certain individuals and when we norm a population and we counterposition them against everybody else, there will not be this there will not be this unity, but rather there will be the norming and everybody else. And so it's even how we talk about data. It's even who we are centering in our conversations. It's the researchers we are talking about. It's the authors that wrote certain books, and being diverse in that selection. Also, this goes in alignment with community cultural wealth. Bilingualism and multiculturalism is an asset. Not only does it rewire your brain and make you think differently about how you are in relation to the world, but many bilingual and multilingual students are not, that asset that they bring into the classroom is not harnessed. Multicultural and pan-ethnic identities enrich the lived realities of those in the classroom. How are we creating space for students to speak or be able to leverage those experiences? Delgado Bernal talked about pedagogies of the home. it's so important to be able to also invite students to bring pedagogies of the home. What are you doing at home? School is just a continuation of your daily life. But if we are creating theoretical and conceptual division between who you are at home and who you are in the classroom, then that's where a disruption happens, and it doesn't have to happen. Again, I'll provide examples, but I'm just laying the foundation for where we are going. And then finally, understand that what matters to them, what affects their communities, and what is important to them should be the driving factor to how we are educating and engaging students in our conversation. I want to, there's an activity that I have. Let's see, Blanca, I know we're running out of time. Should we do the activity, or should I go and move in? Should we conclude with the activity and provide the examples?
I think maybe we can go to some examples.
Okay,
Can we get a quick poll from participants? I'm gauging that this might be useful from some of the interactions. Yes,
okay.
I'm seeing
okay.
headlines. Okay.
And y'all, I'm sorry, there's a lot of we ran out of time, but so examples, classroom examples of what's happening. Dr. Uchenna is a friend of mine. She's here at UTSA. She teaches math. And one of the things that she has done is she has engaged her students in the conversation around what is global math stories. So she submitted, let me see if I could actually, I'm going to stop share and I'm going to click on the website so you all can see. And so she makes critical connections between indigenous and traditional ways of knowing and being and math education, and she turns it into a classroom. She turns it into an assignment. So this is the website for those folks who are teaching math. And it obviously is not teaching algebra and pre-calculus, right? But the principle is that she has assignments that are connected. She has an assignment that is connected to engaging in this. And so what is the purpose? They divide it by different continents, different areas, right? And then within them, you can see the stories. So I'm just going to randomly click on this one. And they connect math to something that is traditional in their homeland. So this is in Thailand, and bubble battles. And they talk about how this is connected to math, and there's critical connections that they make. For hers, let me find hers. I'm trying to rush, but I will send you all of these so that you're able to look at it yourself. And it's an assignment. So her students, she had her students look at how indigenous architecture in their home countries was utilized, and math was utilized to create a contribution to the world. Chichen Itza is one of the wonders of the world. And so the students went and did an investigation on Chichen Itza, the mathematics behind it, the scientific process, and they submitted it to this place and they got published. And so they're looking at archaeoastronomy, they're looking at different things. And in addition to what they submitted here, there was a separate assignment where they created some scientific some mathematical equations, faux mathematical equations that could have been utilized by people building the pyramids at that time. Because one of the things that the Chichen Itza does that people are still trying to figure out is that if you clap at a certain place, and the way the pyramids are created, it brings in sound, and the sound goes out and it makes the sound of a quetzal. And so that's what they were engaging, is this notion of like, how were people able to do that? And it's all math and physics and science, right? So that was one way in which she was able to bring math education that is culturally relevant and topics that the students were then able to dive deeply into. Gary Soto, someone who we work with here in our community and is a community elder, has worked with indigenous communities here. This is Gary Soto. He's one of the people that we partner with through the Urban Bird Project. I'm sorry, but Carrie Perez. And there is this mural. This mural has been, they call it the White Shaman mural. And for the longest time, he kept saying there's oral traditions that say that that the indigenous inhabitants or the original inhabitants of Yanaguana created this mural, and it was actually a map of the celestial, of the cosmos. And he kept, after many attempts at like getting funding to be able to look at this further, he finally got funding through NASA. And what they were able to uncover is that the blue holes that I had talked about earlier that were in the mural, there's 4 of them. He was able to map this mural to actual satellite images that NASA was utilizing. This is ways in which you can apply scientific inquiry where students learn about this and they're like, wait, what? I'm a descendant of these people. It allows for that connection, and they're able to identify ways in which, and then these are other connections where they're able to look at time being stamped in ways through glyphs. We don't have much time left. Okay. Other examples of how you bring in biology and make students love biology is, how many of you have heard this example of hip hop and the use of hip hop and spoken word in engaging students? Okay, so Joey has. Good. So Dr. Emden is at Teachers College and wrote all of these books. Let's see. And wrote all of these books, and I won't go into I'll forward you all the PowerPoints, but what he was able to do is he was able to engage students that love hip hop and understand hip hop and engage spoken word and rap and music, and allow them and created space for them to be able to engage biological concepts. So they're rapping, but they're talking about scientific concepts. They're talking about biology. They're talking about evolution. They're talking about DNA sequencing. So I'll leave that there. That's another example. But I want to get to contemporary. Oh, and then this was another one I wanted to share. Premio Nacional Juvenil. These girls in Oaxaca and Mexico, an indigenous community noticed that there was a lot of problems with the contamination of water in their communities. And so they developed a filtration system through class, through the help of, and it was a college class, through the help of the professor, they developed a filtration system that was affordable, that was cleaning the water, and that they're now working with their local communities to be able to get a system to each community member in the small village. Again, real life examples of things that are happening that are affecting the community, that are affecting the students, that when you engage them in the scientific process, they're going to be invested because they're thinking about the community, they're thinking about the outcomes, they're thinking about their identities, and it pulls them to be able to do something that is beneficial. Really quick, now I know I'm like speed talking, but I wanted to talk just briefly about the Urban Bird Project. So the Urban Bird Project is a project that is funded by the Mellon Foundation. It's a $2.5 million grant, and it has 2 phases. The first phase is we do an interdisciplinary co-taught course. So we have people in the College of the Sciences, we have individuals in humanities, and then we have people in education as a these are the books that we utilize. So they're indigenous scholars. They're all rooted in traditional ecological knowledge. A lot of it has to do with mostly environmentalism. Cajete, we use cajete a lot. And so what we start off with is that a lot of our students that take our class, we try to help them understand that we bring in indigenous knowledge, and we think about migration patterns and individual migration patterns, people's historical migration patterns connected to birds and how birds have been utilized as our guides. And most recently, there was a documentary that talked about how people, Haitian refugees that had fled to South America, actually to Brazil, followed birds to help them out of the Amazon. And that's how they were using birds as their guides, not the stars, but rather birds as their guides to go through the Amazon, similar to what's happening with people in Colombia. So again, looking at nature as our educators. We connect the story of migration and immigration to the codices. So we go in and talk about the codices, and students are then able to develop a deeper understanding for how their ancestors recorded history and their language, but then also how a lot of the knowledge is preserved in the codices. Many of the codices were burnt, but there are some that are preserved. We look through and talk about how we conceptualize the cosmovision of Indigenous communities versus Western knowledge, and why we then do things a certain way through the Native perspective. So this notion of we are all one rather than a hierarchy, and how that directly informs and affects how we approach the process of science and scientific inquiry. If you see yourself at the top, then you see yourself as an observer, versus if you see yourself as a part of, then you think about what am I doing that affects and disrupts the larger community. Then we bring in technology and innovation. So this is a NIPO. There's NIPO Watsinsin. There's many out there. It's an abacus for math. And so we bring in people who help our students learn how to use it to do mathematical equations. Our students, not just our Latinx students, every student gets so into this. They're like, how do I buy one? How do I make it? So we also walk them through the process of making one. And someone had said, family. When we teach our students, then we want them to go and teach their family. This is precisely the point. We want our students to leave the classroom and go teach their family members. So this diagram right here teaches them how to make it. Well, we walk them through the process, this bottom one where it has the two hands, and they make an abacus, and then their nieces and nephews are playing with it, and they're like, what? And so then they take it as a game and they're playing around the house with it. So now we're extending knowledge that is being learned in the classroom into the families. And again, we're trying to counter what we talked about earlier, which is the K-12 disruption that happens, right? Like not everyone gets the same education, but what we do want to foster in them is this deep love and connection. And more than anything, this yearning for math and science, because that is the foundation for STEM as a whole, is developing a comfort level with math. And what we have seen is that our students, even the other day, actually, before the semester ended, I ran into a student and she's like, listen, my nepo, my sister took it and now she has it as her own. She's like, where can I get the stuff to make a new one? And I was like, awesome. Like, that's amazing to be able to see how that's affecting and influencing the family. We talk about foodways and agriculture, and how a lot of the plants and documentation. So we work through, again, this is a different CODIS. And then we talk about ecosystems and preserving ecosystems. And we look at indigenous science and think about how la calabaza, we call them, they're the three, the milpa, the calabaza, and the frijol, and how they all grow together, right? This is indigenous knowledge. This is what our grandparents were doing. There is a system to it. It's not just because you thought it was wonderful. There is a process for why they are growing. They regenerate the soil. They help one another out. So is this synergy that happens? And so we talk about how that is also science. So again, we demystify science. We look at the root systems and we look at the connection with the external environment, the pollinators and what that looks like. But then we also connect it to displacement and eco-colonialism, right? So we're talking about, yes, we're connecting ancestral ways of knowing and understanding ancestral knowledge, CODIS knowledge, but then we're saying, okay, but why does that matter? And so then we connect it to eco-colonialism, and we have our students do projects in understanding, why is the corn doing this? Why are viruses spreading? What does genetically modified corn look like? Why is it killing off the native species? Why are pollinators an issue in this situation? So we go through a process, again, of having our students do external research. We just kind of plant the seed on what we are doing. This is the course component. So this happens every fall. We also look at local politics and place. So I talked about the blue hole. This is the blue hole. And it's, it was a sacred site, right? And now it's like a tourist spot and it's forgotten and it's drying out. So then we work with local leaders and local activists to bring awareness to this, to what's happening. We re-engage the student population or college population so that they're able to be aware of what what's happening locally. So it's a synergetic relationship between community leaders, elders, who would never be invited to be on campus were it not for this class. So what does that look like? We invite them to be guest speakers. So here's Gary Perez, who came in and talked to us about the work that now he is doing with NASA. They identified that, yes, it is a contribution. No, you're not a scholar. And he talked about how he doesn't have a PhD. And so they weren't believing him. And they were saying, well, this is not science, right? So he had to prove, and he went through and documented. So that's the website that I was showing you all in terms of how he had to more than prove that what he was saying was worthy of funding, and he's got the funding. Then we have Alessia Garlick, who is an environmental justice advocate and doing a lot of work, again, in preserving birds and bird ecologies. And so she goes around and does community educating on how to preserve, because I don't know if you all know that San Antonio is one of the main places for people who are for migratory birds. This is a landing spot for them. So we get a ton of migratory birds throughout here, but the city is doing ecoterrorism on them and displacing them. And so there's a lot of activism related to that. We also do, so for student projects, what are we doing for student projects? So our students then understand and connect with the local land, and so the students that created this project, for example, they're not native to San Antonio. In fact, they're not native to Texas. All three of them are from outside of Texas, but they did an analysis of native plants that are growing in the Texas Hill Country and identified the medicinal properties from each plant. And so that's what you see on the left side. And then they had a QR code that they also developed so that people can find out more information about the work that they did. And they connected it to how it's been utilized traditionally, the medicinal properties. And then there's a walking video where they have walking platicas, walking through and explaining what medicinal plants exist in Texas Hill Country. We also, in the spring, then continue the work that students have done in the fall. And we, again, funding is so important, and we're able to do this because of a grant. And I hope that maybe some of you think about ideas and apply for grants. I know it's difficult right now from the federal government, but there are so many things you can do. Mellon is a private funder, so it's different. But in this context, we wrote in that we would have a Urban Bird Project Scholars Program, and we give them $5,000 to investigate further on any research topic that they would like, as long as it pertains to traditional ecological knowledge, environmental justice and science, and working with local communities, indigenous communities, to honor and learn from them. And so we finished our second cohort. We paid them $5,000, and at the very end of the semester, they present it out to the community, and the community is also involved in it, and they have a say on what knowledge is produced, what knowledge is shared, what we can share, what we can't share. But one of the things that they have asked us to do in the process is to make sure that we speak about the Blue Hole, that we speak about how it's a sacred site and it's been taken from them, and how it's drying out, right? So we also have a responsibility to the local community to ensure that the research that we are doing is in alignment with their desires and their needs, but then also that it's carrying through some of the work that they have also been doing. So Zach, I think you mentioned being in I forget what state you mentioned, but these are just ways in which you can approach and work with the community, the local community. And the way we did it was we approached the elders and we brought them sage and tobacco and asked them for permission to work with them, right? So there's also ways in which you engage in scientific inquiry. And that's important to teach our students, is that you go into a community, it's important to ask for permission to be in that space. I know I talked so much. I didn't get to show you the majority of things I wanted to show you, but I hope that and I'll send this along to Blanca and Aisha so that they're able to share it with you all, because there's a lot of really good videos and resources there. And I hope you take more time to look at, the math website, for example. There's a lot of really good ways in which you can turn classroom assignments into culturally embracive, supporting opportunities, not just for your minoritized students, but for all students.
If everyone will join me in thanking Claudia for this amazing presentation. I want to draw everyone's attention to the resource that was shared earlier, where you had the terminology, and then the other side was your current practice, the opportunity to think through a new practice and what it might look like. If you take some time and think through how you might actually apply that, it will be relevant to our next session. So our next session will be July 11th, where Melissa Morris, excuse me, will come in and talk about the syllabus audit, which is our culminating activity for the summer. And all of these weeks that we've been doing will kind of build on each other to lead to the culminating experience. And so I want to encourage you to think about that. Really quickly, also want to remind you to fill out the reflection prompts that are in Module 5 in Canvas. We do read them. I admit that I'm behind, but I will go through and catch up and just give feedback, and thank you all for how deeply you're thinking. And we do have time for just 1 or 2 questions.
And I put my email on there. If you all want to geek out with me and think through what it may look like, I live in for this stuff. So feel free to reach out. So Uchena's does have a lab. So the one that I was talking about with the math, and I mean, I just zoomed past it, right? But hers does have a lab, yeah. And so then I think that there's also, depending on the institution, there may be areas for creativity, right? And then there's sometimes very structured and formal stuff that has to be done, but hers does have a lab. And for her, she's not from I believe she's from Ghana. And so for her, it was really important, again, because of her experience, to make sure that her students were also able to connect to their nation of origin or their country's nation of origin. So she brought that in. And when the students started publishing, then they began to tell other students about it as well. So there are ways, right? I know that it's more restricting when it comes to like, you have to, there's more structure, but then there's also ways in which you can, include some of that. But it's also what textbooks you're using, who wrote those textbooks, what perspective are they using it through, right? Like lectures, like how are for math, I know that it's a little bit harder if you have to do pre-algebra, right? Like it's more difficult, but what are ways in which or what are ways in which you can incorporate some of those aspects? But definitely for the graduate and PhD level courses, it's a lot easier than the entry level undergrad courses. I recognize that. Especially when we haven't been given the tools to dream, we haven't been given the opportunity to think through what that may look like. And so, but the other side is that we have the internet, right? So that's the flip side, is we can go down these rabbit holes and like forget that there's this world out there of possibilities, but that world of possibilities exists. So it's also about key searches, right? Like, so there's a lot of ways in which we could use the resources that are out there for us to be able to dream and imagine what it may look like. Yes.
So I have a question. So what should I avoid when I try this? So one example would be like, it's like I'm a hydrologist, so there's a lot of connection to water in with indigenous people. But let's say I try to include this, but since I'm a white guy from Europe, I horribly get it wrong and I teach it completely wrong how indigenous people would see. So that's something I would like to avoid. So that's where I would be hesitant to do that.
Yes.
So could you comment on that?
Yes, I love the question. And listen, fear is the worst enemy and also what keeps us away from stuff, right? So thank you. That's a beautiful question. I didn't mention that, but fear often keeps us from being able to be vulnerable and in places when we want to be able to be an ally and support. And I think your question by itself is a massive, huge step in going in that way. We won't know what we're doing wrong until someone brings it up to us. And I've been called out by elders, or like, you did this wrong or that wrong. And I say, I apologize. How do I do it? how do I do it correctly? In this project, in the Urban Bird Project, right? So it's two things. It's, are there local elders or people who you're working with that are working in the field that you can learn alongside, right? So don't, if they've already produced it and published it, then don't approach them because it's already out there. But are there people around the world globally outside of the US that are also working with water and you're able to provide examples of how they're doing it? So I think you'll really like the video of the Indigenous girls in their communities and what they use to filter the water system. But this is a really important starting point. We cannot allow fear to control us. And I think back, I grew up in a very homogeneous community. It was Latinos and it was white people. And when I went to college was the first time when I was around so many diverse individuals from different backgrounds and different countries, right? And I remember being fearful of hanging out with Black people, not because I didn't like them, because I didn't want to offend them. I thought it was different. I thought they were different. And I'm ashamed to say it right now. My husband's Black, right? But it was fear. And so I had to ask myself, why am I fearful? And it was, I don't want to offend people. But they're no different. They're not different people. And I think TV and other places have done a really good job of making us feel like folks are different. So approach the work with respect, do the homework, try to see if other people have already done the work that you are doing. And yo, I know they don't tell us to use it, but YouTube has amazing videos, amazing documentaries of work that is already being done around the world. And I think that that's also really important. But I love your question. I mean, I don't think that there is a right answer other than approaching the work with humility, with respect, and with genuine care. You can't go wrong.
Thank you.
I've been to Germany and I love Germany. I told my husband that I would go retire there if I could. It's a beautiful country. I'm sure you miss it.
Well, thank you, everyone. Claudia, you introduced a term today that I had never heard, culturally responsible teaching and pedagogy. And I think that's also another way to think about how we're all approaching this work. How can we be more responsible to and alongside the students that we're working with, the communities that we're in? So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Feel free to reach out if you all have any more questions or, comments.
Thank you,
so much for your
Claudia, and
time
thank
and
you all.
everything. Yes, thank you.